Now it is time for us to transition to our next conversation, highlighting our topic, cyber resilience for India's digital economy, building trust together. On that note, may I please request all our esteemed members of audience to please stay seated and allow me an opportunity to now segue into our next conversation. With that being said, it is now time for me to call upon the moderator leading this conversation. Let's give it up for none other than Milan Naik, President, Box Insurance. Well, we do encourage those hoots coming in from the audience, and a warm welcome, Mr. Naik. May I also take the opportunity of now inviting Mr. Nitin Chugh, Deputy Managing Director and Head Digital Banking and Transformation, State Bank of India. Well, right from the hoots to the dance steps coming in, don't we all love it? Thank you so much, Mr. Chugh, for joining in. May I now take the opportunity of welcoming on stage Mr. Parag Rao, Group Head, HDFC Bank. Thank you so much, Mr. Rao. And if I could now call upon stage Mr. Rajesh Thapar, CISO of National Stock Exchange of India. Thank you so much, Mr. Thapar, for joining us. And as we have all our eminent panelists on stage, I'd now like to leave it in the able hands of Mr. Naik to take it forward.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I just walked into this hall and I said, such a beautiful hall. You could be any part of the world. Such a beautiful infrastructure, amazing crowd, and thanks for joining in, everyone. Every time I come to GFF, and I'm sure everyone on the panel also agrees to it, you feel that you are sort of, in a way, just catching up. There is so much action, there's so much velocity, and there's so much happening in this country. So it's incredible, and I think a great time of the year for us to witness some of this revolution that's happening here in India. As you know, the topic is cyber resilience for India's digital economy. It's all about trust. There's a lot about collaboration. And as a panel over here, we'll try to sort of touch upon each of these themes. And to me, there are three big themes over here: resilience, trust, collaboration. All of that put together hopefully builds a safe and secure digital economy. But before I go there, I think just want to start to set the context with a profound statement. And to me, I find it profound. If you see the human race and you think about human migration, I just looked up saying, what has been the largest human migration ever since existence? The movement from the rural China to urban China, which happened over a period of about 5 decades, was about close to 160 million people. Now, if you think about migration from the physical world to the digital world, that number is staggering. So on a world population, that's 5.6 billion. And most of the people sitting in this room have witnessed from 0 going up to 5.6 billion and counting. So it's incredible. As this world and all of us start living two lives, a physical life and a digital life, I think conversations like these become far more relevant and far more important. So to me, I think the reason I'm saying relevant, if I were to witness, I've witnessed GFF over 3 to 4 years. Every time there's been a keynote speaker, and I'm sure everyone else talks about it as well, but keynote speaker from either the Prime Minister or the Finance Minister, while they share the excitement and enthusiasm about the thriving digital economy of India, I think one of the things they always mention, and probably for my business's interest in the subject, we've picked up themes that always talks about the importance of cyber resilience to build a thriving fintech ecosystem. So I think this topic becomes even more relevant from that standpoint. We are, of course, we are one of the world's largest digital economy. And I won't get into numbers. We are all sort of seeing this almost on an everyday basis. 900 million people digitally connected through smartphones, internet, et cetera, et cetera. UPI is basically our revolution of payments and we are exporting UPI to other parts of the world as well. I mean, 19, 20 billion transactions on an every month basis, incredible. And as the finance minister said yesterday, 50% of real-time transactions are happening now in India. So the scale is incredible. And in that scheme of things, the importance of digital trust becomes that much more important. Just some quick statistics on cybercrimes. Globally, if you think about the overall quantum of cybercrimes and its impact on economy, it today translates into $10.5 billion. Sorry, trillion dollars. Stand corrected. I couldn't believe myself. $10.5 trillion, growing at 30% year on year. So there's clearly some trend that's building over there. 20% of US customers at some point in time have been compromised in some shape and form, translating to about $12.5 billion. Closer to home, the good news is that the governments of the world, progressive brands like the panelists over here, are doing their bit to in a way drive education and awareness. We have a cybercrime number, 1930, and just in a year, they had about 1.1 million people who called into it and registered claims, or talked about frauds, translating to about $1 billion. Now, assume that 5% people called, most don't know. You can just starting to quantify how big this problem is. It's systemic, but super important. Now, keeping this as a context, I will now sort of open questions and a conversation for the panelists as well. So, Nitin, as you think about cyber protection, resilience, et cetera, I think let's pick resilience as a theme to start with. And from your experience, from what you've been seeing around, and what you've been doing as well, would be great to understand the current state and what you see as the problem statement that we need to solve as an economy or even as a bank, or your view of it.
Well, thank you, Milan, for that. I think in this whole connected ecosystem, and we can start at any level, we can start at a global level, we can start at a country level. Everybody in every single identity as let's say a country, the country needs to be resilient. If India aspires to be the 40 trillion economy by 2047, we have to display continuous resilience. That includes, the resilience with the things that we do, the economy itself. It should be able to withstand shocks. But within that, since most of the businesses are going to be digitally led, technology led, there has to be an element of technology resilience also. In any case, there is going to be the whole obsolescence and replacement and all of that. But equally important is also going to be the business lifecycle resilience, the business model resilience, the resilience on the people side. And finally, around all of this, you can overlay cyber resilience also, because most of the context will start shifting towards how important cyber resilience is taken, how seriously is it taken by each and every participant in this overall equation. So imagine, at a country level, we say that we've solved this problem, though it's a very difficult problem to solve, and we are continuously under attack even as a country, the kind of attacks that we get from the foreign actors. We can't be in a position to say that the country is protected, my brand doesn't need to protect itself anymore. Or my brand is protected, I don't care if the country is not protected. My brand is protected, but I don't care if my consumers are not going to be taking care of their own finances or whatever else that they do. So I think we are increasingly becoming so much more connected with each other that we will be only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. And the weakest link in the chain can be anybody in the ecosystem. So when we apply our mind to something like this, the whole perspective changes. What you start to look at it as a practitioner to say that, have I made my customer aware that these are the 3 things you need to be careful with? Is that good enough? Or should I walk across and say that, no, these are the 3 things that you do with me. But there are 30 things that you don't do with me, but they're equally important for you to understand and remember. And therefore, maybe I can play that role of educating you, but somebody else should also play that role. And how can we then come together as a collective to say that we need to raise the bar at a society level, at a country level? I think those are far more important questions to be asked right now, rather than saying that what is the technology you've invested in? Are you using AI or not using AI? Of course, everybody is going to be doing what is available. But we need to, I think, look at it as a much larger picture from now on.
Parag, I think, probably question to you. I mean, you're building one of the largest consumer franchise, the payments-led businesses, et cetera. You've seen all of that very closely. And in that context, I think it would be great to know your perspective about focus on resilience as a theme and the importance of that increasingly for the country, but in terms of what is that you are seeing and actions that's been taken to, in a way, kind of drive that resilience layer?
Okay, thanks. I look at resiliency in a larger, broader sense, but look at the problem statement which you've sort of do. It's not as simple as just cybercrime, okay? India, as it's growing towards being among the top 3 economies in the world, is actually hit. And the way I look at cyber risk, or risk, if you may call so, is at 3 levels. One is at an individual level, like you and me. We know, I'm not quoting the statistics, all the apps we use, all our digital properties which we use, it's prone to risk, and there's a whole ecosystem and infrastructure need around that. Then there's at an institutional level, whether it's regulated entities, business entities, what have you, etc. And the third level, of course, is at the higher level, which is at a country level, ecosystem level, where obviously the reasons for cyber attacks could be slightly different, geopolitical, so on and so forth. And so therefore the approach, there's no single approach. I think the way the country will have to look at it, and all constituents will have to look at it, will really have to be a multi-layered approach to resiliency. So resiliency at a country level, at an institute level, and at an individual level. And that's the way to look at it. There's no one single pill to be able to answer that. Components of that multi-layered approach will have to be, the way I see it, is the philosophies, the business philosophies with, let's say, entities like us, banks like us, or any entity which is playing in, whether it's the payment space or in the money space, and I'll talk specifically of banking, the philosophies that you build into the architecture that you build, whether it's things like zero trust security architecture, whether it is DevSecOps built into the way you manufacture your products and services, and I can go on and on. So that's one kind of philosophy. Second is the way that you look at your customer and look at customer issues such as transparency, the way you handle his or her data, the way you handle grievances. It's a very softer way of looking at, because trust builds up when you get hit, and then your issue gets resolved in a proper way at a consumer level. So that's the second way in which you do it. And the third way, which Nitin mentioned, is about the way you use technology. Technology, if misused, can be, and you can have all sorts of hideous ramifications. But the way you securely use technology, the way you use technology automation to also achieve your business objectives, but at the same time, deliver on this whole resiliency. These are the 3 components of philosophies as I see, whether it's individuals, institutions, or even at a country level, we need to sort of build. And those are the pillars of which, and that's the way we actually look at it. So it's a multi-layered approach. It requires collaboration on any and every part, at an institution level, government level, at an individual level, and everyone in between, private, etc. Use of technology, and building foundations of strong principles of trust, of faith, which is what you build.
Parag, you made an interesting point. In fact, if you think about, when you think from a global standpoint, any multilateral agency or government reports that have come out saying, what's the biggest concern in terms of, issues for the world, right? So with climate change and all of that, which are big themes that are sort of emerging, cybercrime has always featured in the top 5. So it seems to be an issue which is not, of course, an issue of a digital economy, but any economy that's going to get onto digital rails and where consumers are sort of driving adoption, which is great. But more importantly, how do you drive education awareness to make them a lot more saying, what you do and what you don't do? We know most of the people are gullible. And, we've seen Netflix series like, saying, Jamtara, which is now becoming effectively a mainstay, and it's becoming sort of aware that, there is a concern around just education awareness and how you can kind of propagate that as brands. Rajesh, from your standpoint, I think somewhere Parag did mention about it, there are multiple sort of layers of where the intervention comes in. And you have a different lens to this business completely, right? From if you think about, you're a CISO of one of the large stock exchange, you stared some numbers into the scale at which you all operate almost on a daily basis. And given all of that, as an organization or as an individual who's a CISO, and think from that standpoint, how do you see this element of resilience, and what is that the enterprises of the world do to ensure that resilience is secured and taken care of? So some thought from an enterprise standpoint would be great.
So thanks. I think resilience, while as a word has been existing for long and has been consumed in discussions various places, but I see a journey over last 3 decades of being in the enterprise world we used to have information security. Then we started having cyber security. While there are interplays, there are differences. But now is the time when the transition is away from cyber security towards cyber resilience. It actually comes from a fact, two major reasons I see why this is actually becoming more important. One is the digital transformations that have taken place across the industry at large. So with interconnected world, APIs, you have a lot of business use cases. Today, most of the organization and banks, for example, or stock exchanges, we are more a tech companies. The platforms are to work, right? So, and the appetite has changed. Say information security, the thing was nothing should go wrong. When cyber came in, we said we should reasonably be there. But resilient word actually comes in and things will go wrong. But are we there to withstand that? ऐसा तो नहीं है दुकान बंद हो जाएगी. Will we be able to withstand it? If that comes up a day, would we be able to recover? Would we be able to contain? That's where resilience became more and more apt and important for today's sector, right? So it's across the BFSI. I think, and from a standards evolution perspective, another thing which I see is there were ISO 27001, there used to be CIS, there used to be NIST frameworks. Today, people give a reference to DORA. That's a EU framework. That's an Operational Resilience Act, right? So Digital Operational Resilience Act, which actually defines what should organizations be doing to ensure that they can withstand those shocks, and the shocks can be cyber, it can be technology, it can be business, it can be any other, while that specifically talks on cyber, right? I see for organizations to take the journey forward, maybe 3 or 4 of the key things. One, definitely the tech modernization, right? So you need to bring up the technology both from the technology issues perspective and cyber issues perspective. Yeah. You have to have your platform up all the time. It should be delivering to the customers the way they want it. So tech modernization is number one for me, not in that sequence, but in the count of that. The second element which comes to me is upskilling people. So you keep bringing in the best of technologies, you buy the best of tools, but you don't know how to use it. You are going to end into problem. Okay, so upskilling resources is another important element that if you have to go for an operational or tech resilience or cyber resilience, I think there is a lot that is required to be put into the people angle of it. Third is, especially in the regulated sector, whether I am regulated by SEBI and my colleagues here from RBI, the regulatory alignment. You can't have the best of technology, the best of people, the best of processes, but it doesn't follow regulatory footprint. Right? So at all point of time, if you want to be resilient, you have to ensure that you are within the regulatory framework. Right? And fourth, the most important thing, and that's the emphasis is on the most important, is proactive cyber defense for everything. Gone are the days when we can say, okay, things will go wrong, koi baat nahi, jaldi theek ho jayega. Now you have to be proactive to figure out what potentially can go wrong. What are the scenarios that potentially can go wrong? And what is it that I should do to be ahead of at least detecting it more proactively? And I believe most of the organizations, and I can claim for my organization, all of us are investing significantly into observability and visibility platforms. Because we don't rely on what was good 5 years, 10 years back. Today we want to know everything that's happening, 360 degree of everything, so that we can proactively know where things will potentially go wrong and be ready for it. So that's something which I feel are these 4 pillars to ensure that our platforms, when I say resilient, according to me, resilient is from 2 perspectives, from a cyber perspective that I see. One, it's available when it is required, and it is serving the stakeholders in the way it is required to be. And the stakeholders can be regulator, my customer, my internal stakeholders, anybody. Right? So this is the footprint within which I work the cyber resilience and want to align it with the digital resilience. As I typically say, the cyber strategy in isolation cannot exist. The cyber strategy has to align with technology strategy, which has to align with the business strategy. Right? So all 3 have to work things out, and the same thing has to be there in this footprint.
Right. Got it. Yeah, I mean, interesting. So I think, it's amazing the amount of effort and, you're literally living on the wire every day, right? Because you don't know what's going to come. You have a great 12 and a half, 11 and a half months, and God knows very next day what's going to really happen, right? So I think you're always kind of, in a way, not vulnerable, but you have to be on guard to ensure that you are digitally resilient, protected, and not only as an enterprise, but I'm sure at the government level, people are thinking on those lines, and likewise as individuals. I'll just get into some of the consumer psyche side of it, right? I mean, all of us Indians, I think so, believe in the fact, in karma. We all believe that I'm doing good, nothing's going to happen to me. And by virtue of that, I mean, it'll happen to my neighbor, of course, because he will get compromised. Nothing will happen to me. Now, where do you shift, or what do you think progressive brands or enterprise should do to build that level of appreciation and awareness that, no, this is a need for everybody? Effectively, I'm trying to say that, how do we get them to start digitally be more trusting? They feel confident. They feel the fact that when I transact online, there are ways that I'm getting protected or, in a way, taken care of. And most of this transformation is happening in rural India or with our parents, and everyone's getting it's across now, socioeconomic classes, demography. So Nitin and Parag, any thoughts that you can share that what should enterprises do for thinking, if you think from SME or a consumer standpoint, for them to adopt this thing and appreciate that this is genuinely a defined need?
I think the answer is reasonably straightforward. You have to stop trusting yourself first. We all, like the way you said, we think that we're doing everything right, nothing can go wrong with me. So you have some inordinate belief that, I can handle my finances, I can handle my digital apps, I can handle everything. And in exactly those moments of overconfidence is when we end up making mistakes. And we have seen enough examples of, very, very well-heeled people getting compromised. Not because of any other reason, maybe because of socially engineered, attempts on them. Yeah. But nonetheless, those are vulnerabilities that are new to, something, even technology. Technology may not be able to solve for that. So I think the basic premise has to be, as a consumer, if I start believing that I don't trust my judgment on this aspect, I'm not talking about everything else, but let's say on this aspect, I would like to believe that maybe I should be more alert, more careful, more guarded. That is number one. Number two, when I'm interacting with the brand, I have to place my trust on the brand, especially if you're interacting with a fiduciary, like a bank. You have to place your trust. Otherwise, then what is the whole point of doing that business, right? So if you place that trust, the custodian of the trust is the brand now, the bank. So the bank has to start taking a zero trust approach to everything that it does, and which is what everybody is trying to do on the technology side. But at the same time, also make the customer aware that, yes, I do hold your trust, I'm a custodian, I will safekeep for you, but equally important is your place in the whole equation. Because if you don't perform your part in the equation by doing a set of things or by not doing a set of things, and that is where the whole awareness and the continuous awareness comes in. And I think as much as we can keep making people aware, the new kinds of MOs will keep emerging and we will have to keep pace with that. But generally speaking, I would say that awareness and excessive overconfidence can contradict each other most of the times. And when we are in a position to say that, let me just be sure. Yes, there is a second factor authentication, there is a third factor authentication, whatever else that you can build. Let me also apply my mind and be sure that what I'm doing is the right thing. And as simple as, sharing of passwords, which has been going on for maybe 3-4 decades. Why would people do that? It is out of trust in somebody that they've placed. But now people understand that that is not something that they should be doing anymore. Likewise, when a new MO comes up and you have never heard of this, never experienced that, the tendency is that you would believe that there's nothing wrong. And that is where we need to start bringing in this change. I'm not saying that everybody starts to become suspicious of each other and everybody's looking over their shoulder all the time. But when you're dealing with money and brands are taking care of customers as a fiduciary, we have to bring in, at least the approach needs to be more zero trust based.
Parag, you all ran some very fascinating campaigns on consumer education and awareness. And I think Vigilante has been recognized in the advertising world as well. Would love to hear some thoughts in terms of the thinking behind it and what you all did and the impact it saw in terms of, the benefit to end consumers. So if there is anything that you can share from an anecdote standpoint, it'd be great.
Yeah, so let me start off by saying that when I talk about the customer side of trust and risk and the way they look at it, I think let me start off by saying that building trust and adoption, awareness, etc. of security measures It's a journey. It's not a document or a set of documents with a set of rules, do's and don'ts. It's not to say that if you did this, you'll get your money. If you don't do this, sorry, you'll not get your money. It's a journey. And in that journey, as organizations, I think you've got to be very clear that adoption can be slow, especially in geographies like India, where you've got a wide spectrum of understanding of what itself is security. And in today's world, you see even the most savviest and most educated people actually get, they're the ones I've seen in halls moving on saying, take my password, so on and so forth. But that aside, so it's a journey. Philosophically, I think the approach will have to be across the organization. Easier said than done, but it's a journey to say, hey, give reasonable doubt to the customer, he's right. You've got to ensure that his rights are protected. Of course, he shouldn't be scamming you. And so that's the philosophy which you've got to build into your front end, etc. But it's a journey. You've got to keep on hammering away. You've got to keep on, and it's an investment which you need to make. If you look at it as a cost, then you're dead. Okay, because what are you protecting? You're protecting your brand through protecting your customer interests, and only when you start seeing that happening is when you actually build up the brand and you're known for it. Okay, so it's a journey. This whole CAD campaign of Vigilante exactly came out through this whole process, a mix of seriousness, a mix of little bit of humor, built in multiple languages, etc. And we've sort of really built it. So people started recognizing the fact that we're talking security, we're talking this, it's only good for you, so on and so forth. There's no straight rules. As I said, it's a journey. At the back end, when you talk of back end, your IT structure with your employees, etc., you got to be far more stricter. There you have to be, because we talked about training. Training and awareness starts with your own employees and the way you build it up, not just in the philosophies which you build. I think there a proper no tolerance mode to what employees do, what front-end customers do, the employees do with their customers, a no tolerance policy in terms of how do you manage data, how do you internally talk about data movement, so on and so forth, security measures. I think that's a philosophy. These are some learnings which we have got over the years, which we built up, especially with large organizations when you have lakhs and lakhs of employees. Just the Chinese whispers can kill you. Okay, so it's important to build in those core philosophies.
Rajesh, sorry, Nitin, go
Just
ahead.
add to that as an afterthought. The previous panel, one of the persons spoke about healthy friction. I just picked that word up because we've also tried to introduce this whole concept of happy friction. He was calling it healthy friction, because we do realize that customers or we as brands in our desire to make everything frictionless can end up making things far too easier even for people who want to, attack. So there is some degree of friction which is healthy, happy, you can call it whatever, but it is required, especially in the present context, because no matter how much you educate, if there is a little bit of that built in any customer journey, especially financial transactions, it is a strong enough deterrent. It may not completely prevent, but it is a good enough deterrent. So how to strike that whole balance between some little bit of friction that you can tolerate and live with versus something which is absolutely seamless and exposes you to a higher degree of risk, that trade-off I think is still that balance is not yet achieved, I would say.
So Rajesh, from your standpoint, again as a CISO, as much as you're doing to make sure that your organization is resilient, protected from the external world, you have another large workforce and colleagues that's there internally as well. So from an enterprise standpoint, what are the things that a CISO does to ensure that internally the organization is resilient, right? You are just one click away from a cyber attack, literally. And now, as a large organization, I think some of that must be keeping you awake all night. So what are the kind of rail guards that you put in place at an enterprise level, or the CISO put in place, to ensure that some of these things are not, and any new developments, technologies, or anything that's happening that effectively is making organizations a lot more resilient and protected in that manner, but your side of it?
Yeah, I think a couple of things, and I take a cue from what Parag sir was mentioning on people awareness. Okay, that's very important. And most of the cases, if you see the cost of breach studies globally, it ends up with identity theft, whether it's a phishing mode or you hand it over or whichever mechanism it is. And especially if you are a privileged user and you have given those credentials, then God save you. It ends up there. So we have to be prepared for that scenario as well, that there will be cases where you give it. So one mantra which I typically practice and I want the CISOs at large to follow is minimize your attack surface and think of the worst, right? So segmentation, whether you need it or not, segment it. All the principles of security is give somebody access only as much as he needs. Get it revalidated. So these are basic premises of security principles that you have to follow, ensure that the guys adhere. And your policies will always be saying everything. Have a proper simulation assessments or audits or continuous assessments to figure out where the lapses are. Because it's easier or it's important that you proactively identify those lapses than a hacker or an attacker telling you that this was a lapse. Right, so whether it's internal audit, whether it's your own assessments, whether you want to do a thematic, whatever you want to do. First lay down the guidelines, let people follow it, and keep a tab whether they are actually being followed or not. Okay, and I'm a big fan of red teaming. Whether I have put in the best controls, never be complacent of that. The controls have changed. See, I typically come from banking industry. I have seen how the net bankings have been secured in last 20 years. We used to have one password for net banking in 2000, early 2000. One password. You log in with that. If you can do a transaction. Then we came up with the transaction password. Then we came multi-factor. Today, multi-factor also is gone. So we kept evolving our controls. So if we were complacent, we would be ending up. And the hackers and attackers are smart enough. They are much more organized. They will keep challenging you. So have your own hackers in your team who keep challenging your infrastructure, who keep challenging your technology team, even your own security team. I mean, when I do red teaming, it's not only to find faults what my technology guys missed or my product guy or a business guy missed. It is also to see what my monitoring team missed. If I'm trying to simulate an attack, whether the alert was raised, did he see it? So have that practice or culture of taking everybody in to be on their toes. Because security is something, one incident, as you said, 11 and a half months, everything is fine. Why I should say 11 and a half, 12 months, say, आधा घंटा bhi. One incident and everything just goes off. And we all believe, and to be honest, I have seen incidents over last 2-3 decades which had changed, the perception of that has changed. The first incident which I can think of maybe 10 years back, even it was today's parlance, if we see, it's a small incident, but that create havoc. Today, the appetite has changed. People have started believing, yes, things can go wrong. But it should not be that you don't put in your controls and then wait for things to go wrong and then say, I'll correct it. Make sure that you create a deterrent. Make sure you have enough controls. Make sure, and that's something which is for business products, which may be for the products which my co-panelists are actually launching out to the industry, or it may be my internal products for my enterprise applications or any cloud assets or anything that we do. Have basics in place, but let somebody keep challenging it. I think that's very, very important from my perspective to ensure. And if have simulations, I think that's another one which is very trivial. Do phishing simulations. Send some GF passes to your own employees. See how many fall prey to it. I mean, in this context, if you give complimentary World Cup passes, people come up and that's your measure of what is the understanding people have. And in larger organizations, this is an ongoing process, and they would be much more creative in launching some of these phishing mails on your own employees and seeing whether they fall prey to it. So I think we have to go with the worst case scenario and be ready for and keep reiterating, because this is a never-ending game we have to play.
Well, I think Rajesh, you made a very interesting point. The thing is that with technology sort of evolving, as much as we're getting the boons of it, there's a lot of bane that comes along with it. And I was just reading online about, what's been the smartest and innovative cyber crimes or attacks that have happened in the world. Interestingly, there was a casino in Las Vegas which had all the technology, all the people, their organization to support their digital assets and all of that. They had installed a high-tech fish tank. And no one thought of that to be an open port. So the crime guys actually came in through that, bad actors came through the fish tank and compromised the entire and got hold of all the data of that casino. So it's amazing, right? And you think about whether it's a consumer level, having a small router in the house, to a fish tank in a casino, the thing is that people are just waiting to enter in. And increasingly now, all of us, from a physical address, we are moving to an IP address. And with technology, one guy sitting in some part of the world can just send a code out, and suddenly it reaches out to millions and millions of people and can impact anybody. But just to give you a sense of the scale of this is happening, right? Like I told you, the total impact of cyber crimes on world economy is about $10.5 trillion. If you think about it, it would have been the third largest economy in the world. The scale is that big, right? So when you start putting numbers together, you realize this is a big systemic issue and a lot to be solved around.
You know, I mean, we're talking about the monetary impact and then the devastation and the way it can upset your life. I remember the first time I was exposed to this whole thing many years back through a Hollywood movie. I don't know how many of you saw Die Hard 3 or 4. It was about a fire sale. That time I got to know the word fire sale. And you show that the guy takes control of the entire city, electricity, power generating to street lights, to XYZ, paralyzes the entire state and the havoc it creates. Okay, at that point of time I thought, hey, that's a Hollywood pot boiler, etc. Today that's reality, and even worse.
Oh, that's true. Actually, Parag, you're right. I mean, I think, sometimes media always thinks ahead. I mean, science fiction, who thought that, there'll be some person sending his spacecraft to the Mars, and that's all happening today. Another interesting trivia. Do you know where the largest density of telecom towers is there in India? The largest density of telecom towers. Anyone? Anyone from the panel? You won't be surprised, but it's Jamtara. Jamtara has the highest density of telecom towers. Do you know why? Because they want connectivity at 5G levels every time. So a lot of this is sponsored and done. So there's a parallel economy running over there. And we know the series Jamtara has been made by Netflix. So it is almost, it's crept into our homes. Everyone's starting to know about it. But that's again about education awareness. Despite that, I mean, we come from an insurance world. And we talk about cyber resilience, protection, insurance. Despite that, no one wakes up in the morning and buys cyber. I don't know how many people over here bought a cyber insurance for themselves and their family. I'm quite sure maybe one or two hands, and I'll be surprised if there one or two hands come up as well. But the need is very much clearly established, right? So it's interesting. Lastly, coming to the topic, and I think we've got about 5 minutes left, but quickly if you reflect back on, if there are any parting remarks, but apart from that, any sort of conversations about collaboration, because it's not one person who can solve for this, whether for themselves or for their consumers or for the enterprise. How do you see the importance of collaboration, participation, working together to in a way help you make your organization or your consumers a lot more digitally resilient? So any thoughts on that?
I think it's been kind of a running theme for the last few years. And this is not restricted to only our local ecosystem, the country ecosystem as such. It is going far beyond that. And there are organizations which have been set up even by the law enforcement agencies. Like there is this organization called iGrip, which I think almost 180 countries are members of, spearheaded by Interpol. And they track cross-border frauds. And they have been able to prevent some very, very high-ticket frauds which were perpetrated with an email ID fraud. Okay, so that's, again, a known MO that way. Now, things like those, I think, are likely happening even now, that the money will move out of the country very quickly. And the previous panel was talking about easing out cross-border payments. So as much of the effort that is being made to make things far simpler and seamless, the risks are also increasing. And therefore, the collaboration is going far beyond your immediate circle of influence, your customers, your regulators, your market participants, etc. It is now going way beyond that. So certainly enough, it needs to bring out a level of standards. Because if you don't have standards, then everybody is talking a different language, and everybody is basically talking about the same thing in a different way, and the perception can be completely different. So what is the universal language of cyber resilience is something which obviously is very, very hard to achieve, but the standards can be brought out, especially where the regulators and the legislative part is involved, just so that everybody in the ecosystem, while they collaborate, they are equally watching out for each other. Because collaborating is not only about information sharing and saying that, okay, fine, something happened with you, you let me know, I will do something about it. That is how it works even today. But then how do you bring up the whole level of protection? How do you bring the whole level of resilience for the entire ecosystem? And since we are talking of country-level resilience also, in some context or the other, everything else will follow from that. And therefore, collaboration will have to happen, in a far wider ecosystem, much more than what we see happening right now.
Parag, any thoughts on collaboration?
I mean, there's no doubt about it. Proactive collaboration building together as an industry to attack this whole thing, which means sharing data, infrastructure, I think there's no doubt that's the only way forward. It's worked in business. Digital public infrastructure is an example in a sense of the government clearly supporting it, but then regulated entities sort of getting in and building that infrastructure. It's worked in multiple business case scenarios. I'll give an example, a live example, which happened in the banking industry many years back when fraud was what was traditionally known as application fraud. You applied and that. And that time, I remember there used to be a huge amount of application fraud, not just in loans, but even credit cards. The industry got together, formed what they call a list called Hunter list, a Hunter check, okay, which was fundamentally all banks sharing data, say application fraud, these are the people caught, etc., so on and so forth. And it brought down our what we call FTS, and even now that word FTS is used today, fraud to sales ratio, came from that. It really brought it. That was the first probably example, one of the examples of good collaboration working together where agencies got together. So I have no doubt that, of course, it's not just about sharing, it's about working and getting together to form common platforms and a common approach to this whole thing, because it is a common issue, and it is a common issue to everyone. It's a cancer which can only lead to bleeding trust, but at the same time also significant financial impact to organizations. So it's important.
Right, from your standpoint, I'm sure there's a lot of technology providers, a lot of people at play helping you make sure that organizations are a lot more secure from your standpoint, but it would be great to hear your thoughts as you see collaboration and partnerships focusing on enterprises.
So I think there are two spaces. I'll not talk of the partnerships with vendors and all. That's with a different intent or to understand what the roadmap of products are. But I think on the community side as consumers, especially the banking industry, I can say, there it's very tightly knit community, especially the CISOs. I mean, we had till last year when I was in a banking industry, we used to meet every quarter. All CISOs, all large bank CISOs will come in together, and smaller, medium as well. Every quarter we used to be at one place. We used to share information. So we were going with the mantra, the businesses will compete, but CISOs will collaborate. So we need to talk to each other. We need to understand which are the partners, because typically we used to hear as if I am finding issue with a particular vendor or product, he will come back and say, it's only problem with Axis Bank CISO. Other banks are using the same product, right? So there's no problem. And they didn't know that we have our network of validating everything. So that's on the product vendor side, but it's also important on the modus operandi, the risks that are emanating. The other area which I think as an industry at large and maybe country at large that we should bring up is, we should evolve, and this is something which I have been talking to the various government forums as well, that we should evolve very similar to ISAC. There is a financial sector ISAC, Information Security and Analysis Group, that's there as part of the US federal, where anonymously people submit information about incidents, events, near miss, so that everybody learns from it. Because you missed it, but somebody else could have fallen prey to it. So that's something which is important to be taken at a policy level, to get a similar mandate in the country, wherein people can share that information and anonymously, not to be attributed, because the issue also is, if you bring in something, you will be questioned, why did it happen, and then you are unnecessarily defending. So put that attribution aside, that's what the US does. On very similar lines, create that environment, create that collaborative platform so that people can submit that information and others can consume it. So that's something which I feel is a need of the hour today.
All right, I think we are time up right now. We've already sort of run out of time. But I think, great thoughts. Thank you very much for being here. But some good conversations. We looked at, cyber resilience, trust, and the importance of that increasingly from a consumer lens standpoint, what enterprises are doing, and hopefully that gave you a fair sense about the magnitude of issue. But that's the beauty of it, right? As we sort of, in a way, live this digital dream, the importance to ensure that we build the resilience layer and the trust for consumers, for small businesses, for enterprises, and make it a lot more exciting place to be. So I think, increasingly this theme will become a lot more larger. With that, probably we'll conclude the session.
Thank you so much to our speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, let's continue with our applause for them. What an iconic discussion this has turned out to be. May I request all of them to please step forward. Let's create the hashtag GFF moment right here as we have on stage Mr. Milan Naik, Mr. Nitin Chugh, Mr. Parag Rao, and Mr. Rajesh Thapar. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, of course, thank you so much to all our speakers for